Oops. There we go. Okay, and I'm really excited to welcome Amanda to our class today. She is a friend from way back in Girl Scouts in grade school, which is really cool, and then also in high school. And we went separate ways and have found our way back together. And I think in that separation time, you've learned a lot about what it means to be in corporate America, working at Amazon, and now you're transitioning to the classroom. And so here's the intersection of it all. And so I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself and talk about like kind of what phase, what shift are you in right now?
Yes, thank you, Holly. So, yes, Holly and I were the same age and we grew up in the same town and parted ways for college. I went to Wisconsin, she went to Minnesota. And when I went to college, I decided to pursue business. And so I majored in marketing, graduated, and then went off to work in the business world. And had been working in the business world for the last 7 years. And finally last year, and well, as a result of 2020 and everything that happened, and then early this year, I decided to leave the business world and leave corporate America. And so I'm actually in a transition right now to becoming a teacher. And I'm super excited for that. I am getting ready to move across the country again, and I'm going to be starting my teaching journey in Southern Massachusetts through Teach for America, and will also be earning my Master's of Education at the same time. And so I'm really excited about that change, and glad that I'm at this point. It's taken a lot of soul searching and networking and reflection and hard work, and I'm excited to jump in. I know the next 2 years of teaching through Teach for America are going to be really challenging, but also really rewarding. And as Holly mentioned, I had been working for Amazon for the last 4 years in Seattle. And I came into the tech industry from the corporate retail industry and was seeking more of a fast-paced, innovative environment. And so that's when I decided to leave the Midwest, and I was working in Milwaukee, and I moved to Seattle. So yeah, now I'm leaving the West Coast, moving to the East Coast, and starting an entirely new career, kind of from scratch. And so that's really exciting and a little bit scary too.
Oh, awesome. Okay, so Eva's coming in. Cool. Yeah, Andrew, thanks for turning your camera on. Sometimes that makes it more personal, right? I like that. And welcome, Eva. How's it going? So just to fill you in, we have Amanda here, who is just about to tell us why she wanted to move to I'm curious about your fast-paced. You wanted something that was fast-paced. Like, why is that interesting to you, and what does that mean? And did it meet your expectations to work at Amazon, or in a corporate scene? Was that fast-paced enough?
Yes, and I will definitely answer that. And before that though, I'd love to just hear from our students today, like a quick intro and like what's something that you want to learn from me or from this conversation, whether it be about corporate America, tech industry, career changes, being in high school and preparing for any of that stuff. Just let me know what you'd like to learn.
And then Amanda, you can see the chat, right?
Yes.
Cool.
Can I speak it, or do I have to type
Yeah,
it?
totally.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to hear right from you.
I would love to understand like um, yeah, how you were able to just take care of all of it and manage to get through.
Yeah, definitely a lot to manage, and I think that's a little similar. It looks like Ava said, I would like to learn how you were able to handle it all and balance your social life with your work life. Great. So cool. Well, nice to meet you too. And Holly, your question was about fast pace and like what I expected versus what it turned out to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. My first jobs out of college were in the corporate retail industry. So um, I'm not sure where each of you, Andrew and Ava, live, but I first worked for Kohl's department stores. So Kohl's is in, I think all 50 states. You might have heard of it. And so their corporate headquarters is in the Milwaukee area, and I worked there first. And then I went to work for a different department store headquarters that was, it's kind of similar to Macy's, but that store is actually bankrupt and they don't exist anymore. And working in corporate retail, so it's kind of like in the fashion industry or just retail in general, you are focused on sales and beating the sales that you had the previous year, and it's very cyclical. Like year after year you're trying to beat what you did last year, and it gets down to a very granular level of like, if you're working in men's clothes and you have a certain polo shirt, the next year you have to have that same polo shirt. Maybe it's slightly different, but, and then you want to be able to compare, did that shirt sell as much as it did last year? And you get to predict everything at a very granular level. But I found that to be very repetitive and not very creative, and just not a lot of change. We weren't changing strategy very much because we were held to meeting those same exact numbers last year. If we made a big strategic change, then it could not go as planned, and so it was less risky of an environment and more predictable. And I mean, we were still working hard and trying to get a lot done all the time, but things also weren't necessarily the most efficient. I think retail is sometimes it felt kind of old school, and again, this was like 7 years ago, so a lot has changed. But various retailers were trying to catch up and get on board with all of the ways you can make your day more efficient in the office with technology. And so I don't know, I just felt like it didn't seem as exciting and innovative of an environment as the tech industry, where I felt like there was so much opportunity, stuff was changing all the time, it was exciting. And I think I have learned about myself that I really like change. So I've moved across the country a number of times, and I get invigorated by that. And so I was attracted to a place with a lot of change going on. And then when I got to Amazon, it definitely lived up to that. Like, it was just, things are changing constantly, multiple times a day. Like, I don't know, so that was liberating, I guess, in a way.
That's interesting. And you guys jump in if you have questions. But from that, I'm sort of wondering, like, you have all, like, if your work environment is changing so much every day, and it seems like what Andrew and Ava want to learn about is like, how do you manage that with your social life? So did you find like routines in your normal life so that you could be sane? Or like, I think it's kind of a human nature to want some sort of consistency or routine.
Yeah, I'm not the best at routines, but I do think that they're helpful. So I one thing that like is very central to me that I've learned more and more over time, and especially during COVID, is that I'm an extreme extrovert. And by that, I mean that I get energy from being around other people. And so that what that looked like is, even as soon as my first job out of college, I needed to have places to go and people to see and things to do after work to feel energized for my next day. And so was my first job out of college, I was living in downtown Milwaukee, and I looked for different groups that were doing things that appealed to me, so, and also were active. So I found that the Lululemon store had a run club. And so I would go to that every Monday, and it was at, I think, like 6. So I had to leave the office so that I could go and do that. And it was free, so that was awesome. And it was just a great way to get out of the office, be active and be social, and just talk to people. Then I also, I forget if that was what day of the week that was, but a different day of the week, I got involved in a women's cycling group. And we did like a 20-mile ride after work. And that was the same thing. I had to leave the office so that I could get to that. And it was once a week, and that was great. I also, there was an adult field hockey club there, and I'm a field hockey player. And I even have been doing that in Seattle as well. And that was another once a week thing. And I don't remember if that was free or like $5 each time I went or something. And I also, I organized in like a rec co-ed soccer team, and we did outdoor in the summer and indoor in the winter. And one of our games for that, actually, I remember it started at 11:59 p.m. And that's just, it's just a fun memory looking back. But I had to recruit my friends, like, even though it was a work night, we were gonna go and play this soccer game. And it was just kind of like the camaraderie and the fun of doing that together. It was like all of this, like, maybe that would be exhausting for you, and it's just about knowing yourself. But for me, like, doing all of these things gave me the energy that I needed. And if I didn't have these things to do, I felt sad and low energy and depleted. So this is just who I am, and I've learned that over time, and it's something that I still do today.
Why does it feel like you've been waiting for that question? Like you were completely and totally prepared. Like you've been sitting on that your whole life.
Like, I mean, I think just when you're changing careers or when you're unhappy in your life, it leads to a lot of reflection. And so I think you're just seeing that I have learned about myself, and that's really exciting because I didn't know that about myself when I was in high school at all. So you learn what you need, and more often than not, I feel like other people are like middle of the road, introvert and extrovert, or they're just introverts. And that's just not me at all. I'm like the opposite end. And so I have to do what I have to do. And then other than that, regarding like work-life balance, it's important to definitely not overwork and get burnt out. Like burnout is it's just one of the most like dangerous, worst things that you can experience as a professional, because a lot of things are tied up in your work, like your livelihood, your income, your self-worth. And then if you start to have lacking motivation and trouble and you're getting exhausted with doing your work, then it's kind of it can be a downward spiral. So that's why it's so important to find the things that energize you and to maintain that balance. And over time with technology, and also with our global economy, it gets harder to turn work off because people are online 24 hours. And working at Amazon, I had people I worked with in like all the different continents and time zones. So I created boundaries of just not responding to messages after, you know, I was home and done with work for the night, trying not to go on my laptop at home. I really tried not to work on the weekends, because doing all that just made me feel bad. So creating boundaries is really important when it comes to work too.
Yeah, so boundaries within like a schedule, but then also potentially boundaries between like how you interact with your coworkers. So you probably had to work on a lot of teams. You want to talk about what that was like for you?
Sure. So like in a lot of companies and definitely at Amazon. So I've worked at 4 like corporate headquarters settings. The 2 I already mentioned were Kohl's corporate, the department store, and then Bon-Ton corporate, which was a northern state department store that's now bankrupt. And then the 3rd company I worked at was Providence Healthcare, which was a hospital group corporate headquarters. And then the 4th was Amazon. So kind of having worked across those 4 places, but mostly at Amazon. There are lots of levels of teams that I was a part of. So I had my kind of core team that was underneath my one manager who I reported to. So that would have been my manager, me, and then the other couple of peers that also reported to that manager. So that smallest unit of a team, at its smallest, was like 4 people, and at its largest was probably like 10 people. Sorry, I think I'm echoing on somebody's microphone. And then beyond that small team, my manager, or that group, and there were other small groups who reported to our manager's manager, who was the director. So that was like a larger team that I was a part of, and that could be up to like 40 people, 40 or 50 people, actually more. It could be up to like 70 people under that one director. And then from there, like one level up would be the VP. And at Amazon, there were hundreds of VPs. I don't know how many hundred, but maybe even 1,000, I don't know. But that role was very high up, and they were over thousands of people, I think, each. And so within each of those teams, the very small one, the larger one, and then the huge organization and beyond, I thought of some things that I noticed of like my experience. So first of all of those teams mattered to me. Like I needed to know what was going on in my smallest unit of my team, but then I needed to know what was the strategy of the next largest team that I was a part of, which I would, I guess, call my org. And then, which was led by a director. And then for the really big team, what was the vision there? And so for all these teams, I needed a clear, inspiring vision that everyone on the team is bought in on. And it's easier said than done, like coming up with that vision. It has to be forward thinking, and it has to be, I mean, you might have heard of SMART goals, like specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time bound. But it has to be inspiring. Like people need to be excited about it and bought in on it. And to come up with that vision for my smallest team, we would do one day a year in January, like a strategic planning day, where the small team would be in a room together and we would share different ideas. But oftentimes it was a bit of a top-down thing, that the leader of the team would have an idea of the direction we were going, and then we would work together, share our thoughts to refine it and choose that vision. And then the same exercise was done at each level, but I wasn't involved in that exercise at the higher levels. That would have been like my manager would be in that conversation. And then at every level, like in Amazon, we had a wiki system, kind of just like Wikipedia. and each team would have their own wiki. And you would put your vision for your team at the top of that wiki so that whatever team is working with us or whatever team I'm working with that's not on my own team, I could see what their vision was. They could see what my vision was. And that was really helpful. However, sometimes with deciding a vision, it could have been rushed, or some people might not have been fully all bought in, or maybe some people couldn't attend because they were traveling on a business trip, or for whatever reason, maybe they're on maternity or paternity leave, I don't know. But then that's difficult if you're, or you might have joined the team right after they came up with the vision, and then you don't get to participate. So it's really good to have everyone bought in and participate. Also,
how much?
Yeah.
So like, that's interesting. So like each of these different groups has their own vision, but how much of that? It seems like it's a super creative process. But then when you were sort of talking at the beginning, it was a lot about making changes based on data. So like, I guess there's a disconnect for me into like, how are your actual like individual teams having an impact on the whole organization when it seems like it's really top down who makes the decisions, right? And like, I guess that kind of gets to like, what's your day to day? Like, what were your actual contributions to a team, stuff like that? This is all very, like, I've never worked in corporate, and probably none of you have either, but so I'm curious about it.
Well, regarding like top-down decisions and vision, like, I think it's collaborative. Like the leader will bring an idea, the team members will give their ideas and work together on it. And so that's at the beginning of the year. And then throughout the year, when it comes to decisions that are coming in right and left all the time, because things are constantly changing at Amazon, there's so much going on all the time, which can be exhausting. Usually that comes down to the leaders. Like, the decision will get escalated, and then the leader will make the final call, or maybe it gets escalated another level and that leader will make the final call.
Like some of these decisions are like whether or not to have drones deliver packages, or how to, like, what are the, I don't know. I'm like,
it could be like anything. That's what you just gave is like a really creative, like very high level strategic decision, but these are like much more in the weeds decisions of like, how are we going, what's the strategy for this internal tool that our team owns? So something else of working at a company is like, so many of the employees you're actually working for other employees. So at Amazon, we're customer obsessed. It's all about the customer. But who is your customer? Well, I worked in training, so my customer was internal employees. Other members of my team worked on rate setting. They determined through statistical analysis what rate, how many packages, what speed things needed to be done at each fulfillment center. And their customer was internal. They were working with internal leaders of all the fulfillment centers, versus the Prime Air team that works on drones. Like, a lot of their customers are also internal because they're probably making tools and processes for drone delivery one day. And like, what do those internal like employees need to know to do their job? But then other people, I don't know, it almost feels like the minority are actually working for that external customer, you and I at home.
Yeah, interesting.
And so decisions like at Amazon, the structure, the very bottom level role, like as an umbrella term, is called an individual contributor, which means you are not a manager of people. You just are in charge of yourself and your own contributions. And that lowest level, which is what I was, is empowered to make lots of your own decisions all the time. Like, you are an owner, you're responsible for making tons of decisions. But if there's something contentious that like you feel like, I'm not really sure if I should be in charge, or this involves a lot of money, or like, I'm not sure if I'm encroaching on what this other team is doing and we might have some turf wars, like if I take on this project, is that really in their lane? Like there's a lot of that, and that's when you would escalate to your manager. So escalation is like a important skill that I had to learn how to do. So the levels go like individual contributor, manager of people, which is something that you would do like, it's very, very challenging. And I'm 7 years in and I still don't feel like I'm ready for that. Senior manager, director, VP, senior VP, etc. And then, Holly, I think you had another question that I forgot already.
Let's see. Okay, yeah, no, that was like, that's really cool. Ezra is now noting like that's a lot of leadership roles. Like we've talked about different leadership roles. I think it's funny, I guess maybe if you want to note or talk about like, is one person like the idea generator and another person's the decision maker and another person is the conflict resolver. Like that was sort of in our curriculum, how they were broken apart. But does that actually play out in reality?
I think idea generator theoretically would be the individual contributor at the bottom. But really people at all different levels have ideas. Decision maker just depends on the scope, the dollar amount of the idea or the issue at hand, the blast radius. Like if this goes wrong, if this certain thing breaks, how many customers or how many people are involved and how much money is lost as a result? Like, so you're looking at scope and that determines who's making the decision. And then to mediate, it would just be the person's like next level up could help mediate if there is a concern. Also, Amazon has a special writing process for coming up with ideas. So it's a very writing-centric culture where instead of using PowerPoint slides, we write documents and they're white pages. And I shouldn't say because I don't work there anymore, but they write documents. And that is because writing a document requires you to have clarity of thought. And putting pretty things on a slideshow may not be clear, but to write it in black and white, you have to have, that in paragraphs and topic sentences and a thesis or supporting ideas. And so we actually have a process for when you have a new business idea that you write a press release and then you write an FAQ. The press release is supposed to be written like a newspaper article that's talking about how exciting this new item or feature or whatever is for customers. And it's supposed to have real customer quotes. And this is all just theoretical, but you're imagining like what could be. And then at the bottom is FAQs. And that's what are the frequently asked questions and how do we already know like what you're going to ask and how we address that. So that's something that you can even read about online that Amazon does. So that's what I'd say about decision makers, idea generators, and like conflict mediators.
Sweet. This is super informative I don't know for all of you if you've like been reading through our curriculum and been like, well, what is it actually really like? And I want to then open up, we'll talk about that in a minute here, Ezra. But if anyone has any final questions, I guess while you're thinking of final questions, I can answer that. The final exam is actually a case study. So you'll read a case study and then answer a couple different questions. You don't necessarily need to study anything. Yeah, what do you guys want to know? What questions do you have of Amanda?
I don't know if this is like an on-topic question, but like, do you ever fear that robots will steal your job because it's like Amazon?
Wait, did you ask, do you think robots will take your job? Is that the question?
Because she worked at Amazon and like, they like have a whole bunch of stuff that like says, oh, like we're replacing people with it.
I mean, that's a great question. Like that actually did happen while I was there. Inside of the retail part of the company, which is kind of similar to what I did at the old corporate retailers I worked for. They have people that are in charge of buying products that are sold like online. So Amazon.com, like the retail side, it's just one part of the many, aspects of Amazon that we know today, but that's kind of the original part. And the lowest level role actually got eliminated. It got replaced by robots or computers. And that role was responsible for allocating inventory. So that just means putting the goods in the right places in the right amounts. So we want to make sure we have enough toothbrushes in each fulfillment center so that if somebody orders it, they can get it the same day, and optimizing that. And that role got replaced by computers like 3 years ago. And so everyone that was in that role, I was not, because I did not want to do retail anymore at Amazon, but everyone that was in that role got like told in advance that it was happening, and then got some support to help them find a new role.
Within the company or outside of the company?
Within the company.
Oh, that's nice.
So, yeah, I mean, it's a company where you're encouraged to always be learning and growing and improving yourself. And it's also one that seemingly offers a lot of flexibility to try new roles, which was different from the old companies I worked at. At the previous companies, you kind of had to pick a lane, and it was hard to change what your role was like entirely. For example, going from being like someone that works in spreadsheets to somebody that works in graphic design or something. But at Amazon, they allowed that. It wasn't the easiest thing to do, but it was possible. They even have programs now where any role can do training to become a software engineer. And I've seen people go from higher level positions to starting level software engineers because they're curious to grow that different skill set. So you do want to always be adaptable and flexible and looking for what you want to try next, because I think that's exciting. And people don't really stay in the same team or the same position for super long. Maybe they'll change teams but do like a similar role, and then that's a whole brand new challenge. So good question. Do we really only have 2.5 minutes left?
Yeah.
I do have a few other like points that I came up with to just share like advice with you all. So if that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so the biggest lesson I learned, I kind of already touched on, but like you need to take care of yourself. I think it's something you've maybe learned during COVID already. It's a very draining, like work can be very draining, just like school or just like Zoom meetings can be very draining. And your health, mental, physical, and emotional is priceless. So if at any point you feel like really depressed or just in a bad place, like figure out how you can get to a healthier place first. Like nothing else takes precedence over that. And then notice what energizes and depletes you. I learned that I'm an extrovert, and now I'm becoming a teacher, and I really care about helping people over making money. And that's something I learned as I've grown up in my 20s. So those are kind of my last bits of advice.
Oh, that's really great advice for sure. Probably is pretty useful for all of you too. Yeah. Any last questions or thoughts here?
So I have a closing quote that question. Is the meeting going to close us out right at the time, Holly?
Yeah, unfortunately.
Okay. Free time, I mentioned this already, cycling, working out, running, traveling, spending time with people.
Mm-hmm.
And then my last quote is from Hamilton, "I'm the one thing in life I can control." And I just like this because it shows that like your life, like your destiny is in your hands. You can make these changes to be happier. And it's all about trying something, noticing how you feel, and then adjusting from there.
Oh, awesome. Well, thanks so much, Amanda. If you guys want to say thank you or close out and say any final words, but I think we'll probably be cut out.
Thank you.
Great.
Best of
Bye.
luck, everyone.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much, Amanda. You're amazing.